Welcome to Daily Life Connection. Thank you for joining me again today. Let's continue to explore the idea of the God of the desert. The God of the desert. Yesterday we looked at the God who is present in the desert. Wanted today to look at the God who sustains us in the desert. In Deuteronomy chapter 32, there is a wonderful passage talking about Israel going through the desert, and Moses writes this. And it says, "He sustained him in a desert land, in a howling wilderness waste. He shielded him, cared for him, guarded him." In a howling desert waste. Isn't that a great description or a terrible description of what we go through in life sometimes? Sometimes we just feel like we're in a howling, wasted place. And it just feels like there's nothing of beauty, there's nothing of joy, there's nothing of peace. There's just it's just a place you want to get out of. But sometimes we feel like we're stuck there for long periods of time, far longer than we wish we were. And, in those times, I really think the enemy comes and tries to tell us it's our fault, we're no good. If we had enough faith, we'd get out of that place quickly, that God's punishing us. All kinds of lies come against us in the desert. I think it's interesting, it talks about Jesus in Matthew chapter 4. After he was baptized and the Holy Spirit came on him, he went out into the wilderness, into the wasteland, spent 40 days there, and was tested and tempted by the enemy, who came against him with all sorts of lies, questioning his identity and questioning his courage and his ability to stick to things and his self-centeredness and just all kinds of attacks. The howling wasteland, the desert place, is a difficult place to be. One of the great things to know is to find out what Moses found out. In those places, God is not only present, but he sustains us. He sustains us. To be sustained carries the idea of being able to bear something without breaking. And, I think that's what we so need in the desert places of life. In the dry, lonely, howling, dark places of life, where it feels we're alone, where it feels like nobody understands, nobody really cares, where we feel sort of abandoned, and the enemy is like, "Where is your God?" And it's just an awful place to be. And we come to the place where we feel we're going to break. We come to the breaking point. But the good news is God sustains us so that we can bear up without breaking. It doesn't mean it'll be easy. Doesn't mean it'll be pleasant. But the strength will be there to bear up through it. Another idea of sustaining is to affirm. God will affirm us in the desert place. Man, we need that, don't we? I suspect that you're like me, that there are times when you just feel like a failure spiritually and in relationships and in your job and in your spiritual journey, and you just feel like, God, this is just an awful place to be. I don't have any confidence in myself anymore. And that's what those desert places come against. They come against our confidence. They come against our very person of who we are, the very essence of who we are. And God is, excuse me, God is there to affirm us in those times. Get alone with God. Listen to his voice. How many times throughout Israel's time in the desert does God say, "I love you. You're the apple of my eye. I long to be gracious to you." Over and over, he's affirming their worth. Let's just go with that one today. God affirms our value, our worth to him. Just because a $100 gold coin is out in a desert doesn't make it worth less than a $100 gold coin in a velvet case. You know what I'm saying? Our environment is not a reflection of our value or who we are. God affirms us in those difficult, miserable, awful places. If you're going down the street and you see a gold coin in a muddy snowbank or in a mud puddle, you don't say, "Oh, it's dirty, it's muddy, it's in a miserable environment. I'm not going to bother." No, we go, "That's valuable." That's how God sees you and I when we're in those conditions. We may be dried out and parched. We may have been sandblasted until we've lost some of the sharpness of our image, but of who He is in us. But we are valued because He created us, and it's His creation of us that gives us that value. God sustains us. He sustains us. David found the same thing. He wrote it in the Psalms. He is the one who sustains me. He sustains me. And thank God for that. He bears us up. He holds us up. He affirms us. He enables us to be strong enough to not break in those times. But I think it's so important that we just hang on to that affirmation of God in the desert place, of who we are to Him and how much value He puts on us and has placed in us, and not give up on that. Well, something to think about today. The God of the desert sustains us in the howling, how did it say it? In the howling wilderness waste. In the howling wilderness wastes, God sustains us. And He will you and He will me today and tomorrow and for however long we're out there. Let's give Him thanks for that. We'll talk again tomorrow.